A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Universe, may God's peace and blessings be upon all of His prophets and messengers, including His final and beloved Messenger Muhammad. May God's peace and blessings be with you all, dear friends. 15th of the Islamic month of Sha'ban, Hijrah, or 869 of the Common Era, that on that day in the city of Samarra in Iraq, this day is the day in which the 12th and final Imam, Al-Hujjah, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif, was born. And in the history of Islam, the time when the Imam was born. Oftentimes when we read about the early history of Islam, we find that many historians have referred to that general era, that broad era of the early history of Islam, the time in which the Imam, the 12th Imam, was born. That is the period between the 2nd and 7th, or the 8th age of Islam. And they have done so in reference to the many developments, the many cultural, intellectual, scientific, philosophical, and social developments that took place during this period. And this occurred especially under Abbasid rule. The Abbasids came into power in the middle of the 2nd Islamic century, or the 8th century of the Common Era. And soon thereafter began this movement. And thus it is true that in large part there were major developments that occurred, major intellectual developments in places like Baghdad, which was founded in the middle of the 8th century by a center for intellectual activity, for economic activity, for scientific developments, for cultural developments. And so it is true that there were many developments in this early period of Islam. Yet this reading, that which looks upon the early history of Islam as this golden age of Islam, it largely overlooks or neglects the severely repressive political system of the time. That is, the severely repressive political climate that in many ways touched various segments of society. Hardly were there any groups or individuals who were not affected in some way by the general political climate of the time, especially under the Abbasids. We find that early on in the Abbasid era, we find that there was a major controversy which took place, that which is known as the Mihna, the Inquisition, that was related to this doctrine of whether or not the Quran was created. We know that Al-Ma'mun, he instigated this Inquisition, and that he held accountable, especially major scholars, in whether they believed that the Quran was created or not. The Mu'tazila, which were an early theological group within Islam, they had put forth this doctrine that the Quran was created. And so Al-Ma'mun adopted this theological doctrine from the Mu'tazila, and he imposed it on society. And for 15 years, an inquisition took place, where those, and history tells us that some famous figures, among them figures like Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who would be the other figures, and this continued for 15 years until the time of the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mutawakkil, where he continued, but it continued in the exact opposite direction. And there are many other controversies that the early history of Islam tells us about, where many people were persecuted for the things that they believed in. And this occurred under Umayyad rule, and it occurred oppression that took place in relation to and towards the Imams of the school of Ahlul Bayt. We find that they are in climate. When we look at that history, that time in the early 3rd Islamic century or 9th century of the Common Era, we find that to Samarra, which was a garrison town north of Baghdad, where residents. And these imams, they were summoned and they were placed basically under house arrest, under close watch. We find that the situation was very dire towards the imams, not to mention the imams, the earlier imams, their forefathers, and all of the persecutions and the Umayyads. And this despite finding that they had, but despite this, we find that the Abbasid caliphs, they instituted a reign of persecution against the imams of Ahlul Bayt and against their followers. And there is much evidence that as time progressed, progressively worse for later imams. There is much evidence that tells us that all of the imams, they were persecuted in a way in which they were either killed by the sword or that they were poisoned. Many of them were imprisoned. They were placed under house arrest. And this continued all the way toward the later that the 12th Imam was born. When we study history, the early history of Islam, especially the period of the Imams, we find that the situation was getting progressively worse. That the distance between the Imams and their followers was increasing. Some traditions, they tell us that the situation was so bad during the time of the 10th and the 11th Imams that the Imams themselves, they encouraged their followers, their Shia, the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, they encouraged them to maintain a distance from their Imams. We're told that the 11th Imam and Imam Al-Askari, alayhi salam, that he would often encourage his followers, tell them that I say this because I fear for your safety. Because the Imams were being watched. There was a lot of, large part, brothers and sisters, this idea of the ghaiba or the occultation of the 12th Imam. There are many misconceptions, there are many questions that many people have about the 12th Imam and issues surrounding the 12th, regarding the ghaiba of the 12th Imam. But if we look at the historical situation, we find that it was, and thus, watch. They were under house arrest. They were being watched and monitored from all directions. Occultation and disappearance of the last and 12th Imam. Scholars tell us that the ghaiba of the Imam's occultation or his disappearance, that this occurred in two phases. The first phase is known as Al-Ghaibatu Sughra, the minor occultation, which lasted for roughly 70 years, a little less than 70 years, from the year 260 after Hijrah, meaning when the Imam was 5 years old, he entered into this minor occultation, and it extended all the way until the year 329 after Hijrah, with the death of the Imam's fourth representative, fourth Na'ib. And it was during this time that the Imam was away from the sights of the general public, and that the community, the Imam, through 4 successive agents. After the death of the fourth representative in the year 329 after Hijrah, or 941 of the Common Era, the Imam then transitioned into what is known as Al-Ghaibatul Kubra, the major occultation, that which began in that year, that is 329 after Hijrah. During this time, that the community no longer had access to the Imam, between him and between the community, and that this continues from that period until today. It's an indefinite period of occultation and disappearance of the Imam. The traditions say that the 12th Imam will be permitted to reappear at some point before the end of time, and his objective and his goal will be to restore justice and equity to a world that is filled with injustice. And so the traditions, they emphasize this point. And these traditions, brothers and sisters, of course, are mentioned in sources, in Sunni and Shi'i sources. They discuss the objective of the Imam, Al-Imam al-Mahdi, and his role in bringing peace and justice to the world. Now, tonight, brothers and sisters, in the time that we have together, I'd like to very briefly bring attention to two important points for us to consider together. And these points especially relate to the current climate that we're in, the global community that is experiencing this crisis of the coronavirus, the spread of COVID-19. The first, brothers and sisters, the first point to consider is the idea of the Imam's extended period of absence or occultation or separation from the community. If we do the math, the period since the Imam went into occultation is a little less than 1,200 years. And that this period has extended, and it's a period of separation between the community and the Imam. And one of the great du'as that really brings to light it expresses the grief and longing for the Imam. It is in this du'a where we express some of that pain, that grief of being separated from the Imam. I'll share an excerpt of this du'a in Arabic and in English with you. We recite, Azizun alayya an ara al-khalqa wa la tura, wa la asma'a laka hasisan wa la najwa. عزيز لا ينالك مني ضجيج ولا شكوى بنفسي أنت من مغيب لم يخل منا بنفسي أنت من نازح ما نزح عنا. It pains me that I should see the rest of creation yet not see you, and not hear from you so much as a rustle or a whisper. To relieve you days yet are never absent from our hearts. May I be your ransom, O you who are far from our sight, while your kind hand is not far from us. It is during this climate where we maintain social distancing, and many of us are feeling, after this extended period, the difficulty of doing so, of not being able to be with our loved ones together, of not embracing one another, of grief and difficulty. But we know able to maintain the safety and well-being of our loved ones and of community in the curve, so to speak, so that society is able to resume normal. So this separation, this isolation that we're in is for an objective, is for a purpose. It is important for us, brothers and sisters, that we remember that the separation that this separation should not lead us to forgetting the Imam or being oblivious of the Imam and the Imam's place. And this is why it's important for us, just like we do in our normal world, where we continue to communicate with one another over technology. When we call one another, we speak to one another, it's important for us to maintain that strong bond between us and the Imam. It is important that we maintain the presence of the Imam, seeks to bestow upon those who have been oppressed in the land and to make them the heirs and to make them leaders. The ahadith are numerous, brothers and sisters. In many sources, they tell us that God will send before the end of time, He will allow the descendant of the Holy Prophet, whose name matches the name of the Prophet, whose objective is the same objective as the Prophet, and his objective is to restore justice and equity يملأ الأرض قسطا وعدلا بعدما ملئت ظلما وجورا. And this is the objective of the Imam, to restore equity to the world, to restore justice to the world. What this crisis that we are encountering today, the global oppression, it has revealed to us how we as human beings have, over the past several decades, progressively destroyed our environment. Many of you may have read in the news about how in some areas of the world, here in Los Angeles, for instance, we are told that now, with people not commuting, with people not going out, that the environment is cleaner than it has been in over 20 years, that the level of pollution has gone down, that the whole environment is clean. In many other parts of the world, this is something that we're experiencing. In the workplace, we are now realizing how essential they are, of a kinder, more equitable, and more just world. We have seen people, those who are on the front, we have seen the kindness and generosity of people reaching out to one another during these times. And so this also reveals to us the possibility, sisters, is what is out the birth of the 12th Imam. We renew our allegiance to all that the Imam represents, to those values of justice, being more just, being equitable, being kinder, fairer, and with our environment and with the world around us. Let us end, brothers and sisters, with the dua, the segment of the dua from Dua al-Iftitah, where we praise the Imam and we pray for the 12th Imam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma wa salli ala wa huffahu bimalaikatika al-muqarrabin وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك، استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله، مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له، أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وانصره وانتصر به، وانصره له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيل ما قصرنا عنه فاتقنا، وكثر به قلتنا، وأعزز به ذلتنا، وأغن به عائلنا، واقض به عن مغرمنا، واجبر به وسد به خلتنا، ويسر به عسرنا، وبيض به وجوهنا، وفك به أسرنا، وأنجح به طلبتنا، وأنجز به مواعيدنا، واستجب به دعوتنا، وأعطنا به سؤلنا، وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا، واعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا، وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا، واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. انصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله، غيبة ولينا، وكثرة عدونا، وقلة عددنا، وشدة الفتن بنا، وتظاهر الزمان علينا. فصل على محمد وآل محمد، وعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله، وبضر تكشفه، ونصر تعزه، وسلطان حق تظهره، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعافية منك تلبسناها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Once again, I congratulate you, my dear brothers and sisters, on this joyous occasion, and we pray to God on behalf of this important day, behalf on the 12th and final Imam, to hasten the appearance of the Imam, to bring comfort and relief to those who are sick, those who are ill, and those who are struggling. We pray to Allah to bless the souls of those who have passed away. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات نهدي جميعا ثواب سورة الفاتحة مع الصلاة على محمد وآله